Hello everyone, welcome back to Amy's Bookshelf. About a year ago I did a Q&A on my YouTube. I'll put it up at the top. And so I thought, because it's been a year, I should do another one because it's just always fun to answer people's questions. I also feel like being a content creator is always a bit interesting because sometimes you assume people know things about you because to you it's obvious, and then you realise that, you know, unless you talk about it frequently, everyone's not going to know about it. So I put some question boxes on my Instagram story and asked people to submit questions, and I'm going to go through some of them now and answer them and just talk about, yeah, all of the topics that you guys have raised. Okay, so starting with one that, again, I think is really obvious to me, and I am surprised when people don't know it, but clearly it's not obvious to everyone, and that is Bookstagram my job? Or what do I do for a living? Or yeah, what do I do aside from social media? So I am currently a senior editor for a data science company, and I did an English literature and language degree. So over the course of the 3 jobs I've had since I've graduated, they've all sort of been in editorial or proofreading, that kind of line of work, which is great because I feel like I can really use my degree, because on a day-to-day basis I'm very much working with like grammar and sentence structure and spelling, which is exactly what my degree sort of prepared me for, which is really nice. It also ties very well into like the rest of my life, because obviously I love reading and books, but having an English degree and working in publishing or books is a really difficult transition. If anybody else has an English degree or has attempted to get into the publishing industry, they will know what I'm talking about, but it's very tricky to get into. Often when you want, sort of when you've graduated and you're looking for your first job, it's really hard to get into because it's not always well paid or paid at all, because they do a lot of unpaid internships, and because they're so competitive, a lot of people do want them and they can kind of get away with that. A lot of them are in London. I don't live in London. I live commutable to London, but it's just not what I want to do. I don't want to commute into London. And so yeah, publishing wasn't really that attainable for me, even though when I graduated I had no idea what I wanted to do, and publishing seemed like a logical way to go. Now that I've been graduated for, I think, 7 years, I'm sort of glad I didn't go into publishing, because I think it would be too close to home for what I do as a hobby, because I work so much with books on social media, and obviously I work with publishing companies for my social media. I think it's nice that I can keep my job, like my 9-to-5 job and my passion job, separate, and then they don't overlap too much. I think that's quite nice actually, because you can sort of turn off from one and switch on to another one and they don't really feel like the same thing. So yeah, in conclusion, Bookstagram is not my full-time job. I don't have any intention of making it my full-time job either. I really enjoy it. It's nice that I can make a bit of money from it, but yeah, I have a normal 9-to-5 job, and I just do social media on the side. Next question is sort of a segue from that, I think, but I thought it was a really interesting like discussion point, and it is, how long do you see yourself doing a lot of Insta content creation for? I started my Instagram the year I graduated, so 2017, so I've been doing it for 7 years now. No, 6 years. 6 years now, and to be honest, it feels weird to think about a time when I didn't do it, which I know sounds quite dramatic, but it's been sort of part of my life and part of my routine for so long now that it would feel weird to stop, and I don't have any intentions of stopping anytime soon. I think if I got to a point where I just became really unenthusiastic about it, and it felt like a chore and like proper work, then I wouldn't want to force myself to do it anymore. But I don't really see that happening anytime soon. I don't really have a necessary end point. I don't really have anywhere that I think I could get to and then I would stop. It's sort of just a feeling. So if I ever get to a point where it just feels like a lot of hard work, it's really stopping me enjoying my downtime, it's really stopping me enjoying reading and books, then I think I would stop. But at the moment that hasn't happened, and I think I have quite a good way of like balancing that, so making sure that I'm not just doing it for the sake of content creation, and that I am doing it because I still enjoy it and that it's a passion for me, and I'm doing it because I love it, and ultimately if I stopped loving it then I would have to stop doing it. But like I said, I don't think that will happen anytime soon. I don't really have any sort of time frame, you know, I don't have this like, oh, after 10 years I'll stop doing it or anything like that, but yeah, I think I will just carry on with it as long as I am okay and I'm happy with doing it still. Okay, next question is which books got you into reading? I remember that you referred to yourself as a bit of a late bloomer to it. Yeah, so I do refer to myself as a late bloomer to reading. Obviously, I learnt to read at the same time as everybody else, but I remember like reading the occasional book in primary school when, you know, like when those book fairs came, like when you got on the back of a bus and they were full of books. I can't remember what they're called, but I used to obviously get books when everybody else did them, but I really didn't really read outside of that. And at secondary school, most of the time, again, I didn't really read a lot too. When I got to about sixth form, or maybe year 11, I had this English teacher that I really loved, and honestly, she's probably the reason I ended up studying English and the reason that I ended up loving books as much as I did. But even at school, I read a fair amount, but I was very new to it, so I didn't really know what I wanted to read. I had not established like any of my favourite genres. I was kind of just picking up books either because they were well known, like classics, and mostly hating them, to be honest, or recommendations off that English teacher and things like that. So yeah, I hadn't really established myself properly as a reader. So in sixth form, yeah, I did read a little bit, but not as much as I did now. And it was when I went to uni that I really started amping up my reading habits. So again, not till sort of final year. I think in the first like couple of years of uni I read maybe like 10 books a year, so a fair amount, probably more than like the average person, but not like I do now, not anywhere near what I do now. But since I sort of started doing it as a quote-unquote job or for my social media, it's sort of given me motivation to read more because I've become part of a community that everyone loves books. There's so many recommendations constantly flying around. I've also had the time to really learn what genres I like, what books I like, what genres and books I don't like, and that really helps curate what you are going to choose to read and therefore just generally enjoy the reading experience more, because you can really understand why you have or haven't enjoyed something, which I think is really important with reading. So yeah, I was a little bit of a late bloomer. However, to go back to the original question, the books that got me into reading, so I think there are sort of like two that I want to talk about. The first one isn't a specific book, but it's an author, which is Nicholas Sparks. Now, I don't read Nicholas Sparks anymore because there was some controversy with him, I think about 10 years ago maybe, where some emails came to light that were homophobic, that were to his child's elementary school, I believe, or something along those lines. And actually, in hindsight, thinking about the plot of his books, they are very like heteronormative, but they are romance books, and to be, you know, in the nicest way possible, they're sort of trashy romance books, which is not a criticism. I love trashy romance books, which is why Nicholas Sparks was one of the authors that convinced me how much I love reading, because I would just devour the books, and I love a romance. So that's the reason I really loved most of his books. I did read most of them. I only own one of them at the moment because I donated the rest to a charity shop, and the one I kept was A Walk to Remember because that was one of my favourites of his, and it felt right keeping one and then donating the rest to a charity shop. So like I said, don't read anything from him anymore, but he really convinced me how much I love romance and ultimately how much I loved the escapism of reading and things like that. And then the second book I think really convinced me to love reading was The Hunger Games. So I got this really cool like series edition of The Hunger Games probably when I was 17, I want to say. And as everyone knows, The Hunger Games have aged like a fine wine. They are still really good books, and really good dystopia books as well. So yeah, I stand by how good they are, and again, I just read them really quickly, and just one of those books where you just can't put it down. You really feel like immersed in it. You just love it. You want to Google things afterwards. You want to talk to people about it afterwards. And so yeah, again, just really convinced me how great books can be and how much I love reading. So I think they're the two main ones. There are a couple of other ones sort of floating about in between that, but those are the ones that really stick with me, that I remember from before I went to uni. So the ones that kind of planted the seed for what I will become in my 20s, or the reader I will become in my 20s. This is a really interesting question actually. So an author / book you wanted to love but really didn't, or actually ended up hating. I think I've got a few examples of these, and they're mainly ones that I think have been talked about a lot on social media, or ones where I read the plot and I just feel, read the blurb and feel really like it should be a book I love, and then I read it and I'm really disappointed with it. So for some examples, I think Normal People by Sally Rooney. I love character-driven stories, I love slow burn romance. I really should have loved Normal People, but I didn't. I just found it ultimately quite annoying, and I just really couldn't get on with it. Probably also the lack of speech marks didn't help. I find that quite difficult as well. I love the TV show, but just didn't love the book, so that one was quite disappointing. Also, The Secret History and The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. Didn't like either of those books. I think I've just come to the realisation Donna Tartt is not for me. But again, found the books quite hard going, quite slow, dense, and just quite convoluted really. I don't think I really understood like the point of them. I really couldn't get to grips with like the premise and the like layers in the narrative. Both of them I DNF'd. So like I said, I've just established Donna Tartt is not for me, but people really love them and it's kind of a shame that I didn't, but oh well, we move on. Yeah, I think they're the two biggest examples of books that yeah, I've been disappointed by. But it's always a shame when I'm disappointed by books, especially ones that have been hyped up, because I think ultimately I want to love every book, but you're just not going to, especially when, like me, you read 120 books a year. You are not going to like 120 of them, so it's just the way it is. Oh, and actually a final example of an author who I've not been really convinced by yet is Ishiguro. So I read Never Let Me Go like, oh, I don't know, 8 years ago, a long time ago. I barely remember it and I want to reread it, but I do remember liking it. And then I read Clara and the Sun maybe 2 years ago and I just really didn't like it. I really didn't get it. I thought it had so much potential, but it just didn't end up going anywhere. So I want to read more of his books because again, he's this author that everybody seems to love and I think I would really love. I just need to find the right book. So I'm going to reread Never Let Me Go and maybe pick up something else, and fingers crossed I will become an Ishiguro fan because I really want to be. Okay, I've kind of got these series of questions, actually, all from different people, but all along very similar lines. So I'll kind of do like a quick fire. So the first one, what is your favourite craft project you've done? So I've done a few, and that's actually a really hard question to answer. I love all of the amigurumi I've made, like you can see some here. I think you can just about see that bee up there as well. There's one behind me. I really love some of the clothes I've made because clothes feel really satisfying because you can actually wear them. So this is actually my latest project, which I finished this morning, although by the time this comes out I'm not sure when it will be. But I think my favourite craft project, just because it took me quite a long time and I'm really happy with the outcome, is this yellow sweater vest that I made at the beginning of the year. It was the first piece of clothing I made that I felt really like proud of it because it was a little bit complicated. You know, I've made like scarves and hats, I've attempted jumpers and they haven't gone very well, but this was the first thing I made that I felt really comfortable wearing. I didn't feel like I was just wearing it because I made it and I wanted to prove that, you know, I'd made something. I wore it because I actually like it. So yeah, I was really proud of that and I want to try and make a few more sweater vests in like different styles. But yeah, I really loved making this. I really like making this as well. And all the little like amigurumi things I make I really like too. So honestly, I'm not fussy, I like all of them. But yeah, I think the sweater vest ultimately is my favourite. Next, what is my favourite plant and why? So I own a lot of plants. I don't think you can see many here, but I'll try and put some pictures up. I think I own about 30 and a lot of them have grown a lot since I've had them, which my partner isn't very happy about, but I think he just ignores them, to be honest. But I'm really proud of how far they've come, and I think I'm gonna have to say my Monstera, who's called Emma because she's a cheese plant and Emma is short for Emmental. Anyway, but she is just huge. She keeps giving me leaves that are bigger than my head and I am so impressed with how big she's got. She's a little bit wild and I keep having to replant the moss pole in the middle because it keeps leaning, and I think I'm gonna have to do that again soon because yeah, the new leaf that has come out is quite heavy and it's on the same bloody branch as the rest of them, so she's got a very big lean on her. But yeah, I'll put a before and after picture here so you can see what it looked like when I got it and then what it looks like now, and I think because of the growth alone I'm just gonna have to say that. Also, Monstera are actually very low maintenance. They look really impressive, but as long as you have a sunny room, so our living room is south facing, so we get a lot of sunlight in there. And I think as long as you've got a lot of sunlight, they really don't take much maintenance at all. I water it once a week in the summer, once a fortnight, once every 3 weeks in the winter. Just wait until the soil dries out. And then occasionally I'll dust off the leaves, but really I don't do that as much as I know a lot of people do. And occasionally I'll mist it, but again, I don't do that as much as I know a lot of other people do. So yeah, and so I haven't really done much to make her grow that big, but she's still managed to do it. So like I said, as long as you've got a lot of sunlight somewhere, Monsteras will do really well. And then the final one, what is your favourite type of books? So I always answer this question by saying romance, because I do love romance. As I spoke about earlier with Nicholas Sparks, romance is what always convinces me why I love reading. Every time I pick up a romance, it reminds me why I love reading. I think it's one of the best forms of escapism, and you know, I love a bit of romance. But I do actually struggle to find romance I really love, and maybe because I've read a lot of it, I just have become a bit tainted and find some storylines predictable. So I think, as well as romance, my second favourite genre is probably historical fiction. And again, I think for the immersive side of it, I love sort of being immersed in a different time in history and really making you feel like you're in that time period, like it's not 2023. So yeah, I think that's probably my second answer to that question. So another craft-based question is, absolutely love your cross stitch, thank you. Where do you get your ideas, patterns from? So there's a wall of all of my cross stitch and embroidery up there. I'll put a picture of it here so you can see. I'm really not an expert. I'm really not that good either. It's just one of the craft hobbies I do. I just can't keep my hands still, basically. So I'm like constantly making things or doing things. But one of my favourite websites, if you don't already know about it, is dmc.com. Now this is really great for free patterns. They also sell a lot of like materials and paid for patterns, but their free pattern area is insane. There's just so much available, and all you have to do is give them your email address for a mailing list. So if you don't mind doing that, then you can download literally hundreds of cross stitch, embroidery, crochet, knitting patterns for free. It's amazing. I'll put a screenshot of the website here so you can see it, but yeah, it's a really brilliant website. So all you have to do is go over to their pattern area, and then there'll be like free patterns, and it will be organised by like level, so beginner, intermediate, expert, and then also by craft, so knitting, cross stitch, embroidery, etc, etc. So if you narrow it down by that, you'll then get a list of everything, and then I think you can narrow it down further, so by like colour or like topic, you know, like flowers, nature, that kind of thing. And then yeah, you just give them your email address and you can download these patterns for free. So that is my go-to for cross stitch and embroidery in particular. And then in terms of knitting and crochet, to be honest, Etsy is probably my main place. And the patterns aren't always cheap. I think on average I probably pay about £4 or £5 for a pattern, but they're created by, you know, by small businesses and by creators, so it's really nice to support them. And often the support you get from the creator and the seller is really, really good. So if you get stuck with a pattern and you're not sure, or you need help with one of the stitches, you can message them and they'll normally be really good at helping you. So Etsy is a really good place for that, just because it's like very human, you know, you're actually talking to a real person. Otherwise, just Googling. Google can be a bit of a minefield. You know, when you Google like, I don't know, free plant pot amigurumi, it can be quite hard to kind of wade through all the stuff you don't want, but if you have a bit of patience and you can sit there, normally you can find quite good patterns for free. So depending on whether you want to pay for it or not, there are some good areas. If you don't want to pay for it, I'd recommend DMC. If you are okay paying for it, I would recommend Etsy, and they're my two go-to areas for patterns. Oh, also I should mention, recently I've been really on getting patterns just from TikTok. So I watched obviously a few crochet videos on TikTok, and then my entire For You page became crochet, which I wasn't that mad about, to be honest. But I found a lot of really good creators on TikTok whose patterns are either free and they post a whole tutorial on TikTok or on YouTube, or they will be selling patterns and it will be in a link in their TikTok. So that is a really great place to find them as well. Honestly, if you just Google like crochet, crochet talk, crochet TikTok, things like that, sorry, I just said Google, didn't I? If you search for, TikTok is kind of like a Google, I think that's what they're trying to become. Anyway, if you search for crochet talk on TikTok, then it will come up with loads of people. Watch a few videos, then if you let the algorithm do its thing, some more will probably appear on your For You page and you'll be able to find some creators that you really like. But that is where I got this pattern from. The whole thing was for free on TikTok. I adjusted it slightly because this was like a halter neck in the real thing, and then I also added some extra bits here to make it a bit square. But yeah, the pattern itself came from a TikTok video, so TikTok is a great place as well. Okay, a few more questions. So how do you find the flow of social media, e.g. lots of views / engagement versus quieter times? So I've been talking about this a little bit more actually on my Instagram recently, because I have become a little bit disheartened by the lack of engagement on Instagram. I think ultimately it's one of those things that you shouldn't overthink. There's always a lot of sort of content going around saying, oh, if you do this one thing, it will give you great engagement, or are you doing this? Well, you must be shadow banned and that's why you're not getting good engagement. I think all of those things delve a little bit too deep into it, because ultimately no one person is there controlling who sees our video. It's an algorithm, and algorithms are very random, well, random to a point, and they are a bit uncontrollable. So I don't think there's any point in trying too hard to like figure it out, because by the time you have, it will probably just change and then you'll have to start again. So I'm not the kind of person that tries to overthink it, and ultimately if something does badly, I just try and move on. I just try and not think about it, not get down about it, just move on, keep posting, keep doing my thing. On the flip side of that though, it is incredibly frustrating, and at the moment I am actually in a point where I don't have very good engagement. I haven't had any paid work on social media for a little while, and I think that's a mixture of things. I know a lot of other content creators who are also in a similar position, who are also, especially book content creators, that haven't had any work in a while, and I think it's because a lot of companies are focusing on TikTok a little bit more, which is fine, you know, that's kind of where the market is, that's where they want to focus, it's like the in thing to be doing right now. But it is a bit of a shame that I've lost momentum on Instagram and even TikTok. I've got more followers on TikTok than I do on Instagram, but I don't get a lot of work on there either. So yeah, I just sort of have to wait for it to come back round again. But one thing in particular I get frustrated about is if a post hasn't performed very well. To me, that isn't like the number of likes, the number of comments, the number of shares. It's literally the reach. And what frustrates me is if you take Instagram, where I have 104,000 followers, on average, my posts are reaching probably 7,000 or 8,000 of those people. So not even 10%. It is the smallest percentage of my actual followers. Now you have to take that 104,000 with a pinch of salt. You know that some of those accounts will be robots. You know some of those accounts will be inactive. You know some of those accounts aren't active enough to be seeing what you're doing every day. It's never going to be 104,000 people. But to only be 7,000 or 8,000, I think is such a frustrating position to be in, because what is the point in building such a large following and putting in the effort of building a following when I'm reaching the same people I did when I had 10,000 followers? And that's why I think it's a bit frustrating, because you do put in all of this work, and I'm not asking for people to like it, I'm not asking for people to engage with it, I just want them to see it. I just want to be able to share something and it actually appears on people's page, and that's I think where the crux of my frustration, because then it will be up to people whether they want to engage with it, whether they like my content, etc, etc. But yeah, that's where I found the algorithm really annoying. And similarly with story views as well, I don't get a lot of story views, and again, considering I've got 104,000 followers, it's weird to me that it's just not reaching that many people. And again, it's something I try and not overthink, because in reality, what can I do? How can I control that? I can't. Sometimes I get a lot of people that see my stories, sometimes I don't, and there's nothing I can do about it. So yeah, I think to answer the question, how do I find the flow of it? I find it very frustrating, but I try not to worry about it, because social media is fickle, social media is very impermanent, social media is very fast paced. So just go with the flow, basically. If something does badly, then that sucks, but move on from it, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. As long as you're still loving it, it's fine. It will come back around again. Hopefully the people who really love your content will be able to find you and be able to engage with you, and you just have to hope for the best with regards to that. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's how I feel about the like algorithm engagement situation that we're in at the moment. And to finish off, there are two questions which sort of tie into each other, so I'll do them at the same time. So the first one is how to avoid the trap of just reading books that have all the hype / are new. Secondly, do you find it harder to enjoy / are you more critical of books that have been hyped up? So I think this is quite a personal thing for me, but I actually don't read a lot of new releases for two reasons. Firstly, because a lot of them are in hardback and I don't like hardbacks, and secondly because I really don't feel the urge to read something as soon as it's out like I think a lot of other people do. That's not criticism, that's just like personal preference. I have a very big TBR to begin with. If you saw my video where I counted all my books and how many of them I haven't read, it's frankly quite embarrassing. So I need to work through the books I already own without buying loads more. That doesn't mean that there aren't some exceptions. There are some books that I have purchased immediately as soon as they're out and got in hardback hardback. Good example of that is at the end of last year, The Winners by Fredrik Backman, which was the final book in the Beartown trilogy, was translated into English and published, I think, in October, and I got it immediately because I love him, I love that trilogy. I needed to find out how it ended. So I bought that in hardback, I just committed to it. So there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, I enjoy working through the books that I have already owned and already bought, and I don't really feel like a compulsion to be keeping up with new releases. I think a lot of people want to be talking about new releases, but there are like such a plethora of books that have already been published. We don't necessarily need to focus on them. I also find that like the people I interact with on Bookstagram and TikTok and things like that are also of a similar mindset to me. So I think I've sort of curated this community where there's not too many people that are bothered about new releases, and therefore it's kind of easy to avoid that hype. But moving on to the second question, do I find it harder to enjoy hyped books? I think it's a mixed bag. I think sometimes things are really hyped up and then it's really disappointing if they're not like a 5-star read. But also I think as long as you don't go into them with too many expectations, so just keep your expectations low, then normally you can enjoy them regardless of what's been said. And I think, again, going back to what I was saying at the beginning of this video, what's most important is just knowing what you love. So don't just buy a book because it's been really hyped up and because loads of people have said it's amazing. Make sure you're buying that book because it's actually a book you're going to enjoy, because there are plenty of popular books that not everyone is going to enjoy. Like I said at the beginning, Normal People, Donna Tartt books, Clara and the Sun, like those are books for me that were really popular, that were massively hyped up and I didn't enjoy, because not everyone is going to enjoy every book. So make sure it is a book that you actually are going to enjoy, or at least it sounds like you're going to enjoy. Don't just buy it because it's been hyped. Like there are plenty of fantasy books that have been insanely hyped up. I'm not going to buy them because I don't like fantasy, so that would just be setting myself up to fail. So I think that is important too. Okay, that is the end of my Q&A. I hope you have enjoyed. Sorry I couldn't get to all of the questions, but this would end up being a very long video if I did. I'll try and do them, you know, more frequently, especially on like my stories and things like that, and then I'll try and do one on here every year or so I can answer some more questions. But I hope you've enjoyed this. Please like the video and please subscribe to my channel if you have, and I will see you next time. Bye!